Hello, everyone, and welcome to Smart Talks powered by Geniecast, with support from the Nitrous Effect and the Emerson Leadership Institute in the Shape It School of Business at St. Louis University. I'm John Lanius, the Chief Operating Officer here at Geniecast, and today our Smart Talk is entitled Authentic Connection, Healthy Communities, and Long-Term Well-Being, with Alana Muller and Jennifer Bardot. Alana and Jennifer, welcome to Smart Talks powered by Geniecast.
Hey, John, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us today.
Absolutely. Well, I want to get the audience to understand and know a little bit about the both of you. Just high level, two incredible leaders that I love spending time with. So let's get to know them. Let's start with Alana. Alana Muller is an entrepreneurial executive leader whose primary focus is to connect, inspire, and empower community. She is the former president of Kauffman FastTrac. Today, Alana is the founder and CEO of Coffee Lunch Coffee, where she is a speaker, workshop facilitator, and coach, and author of the book, Coffee Lunch Coffee, a practical field guide for master networking, and a companion blog, coffeelunchcoffee.com. Her accessible, relevant, immediately actionable approach to professional networking for those interested in connecting with others, getting involved in their communities, seeking to advance their careers, or looking to build social relationships has helped thousands of people formulate a strategic mindset around networking. She is the host of Enterprise.ing podcast and a columnist for American City Business Journal's bizwomen.com, among other publications. She has been a contributor to Forbes, the Huffington Post and CNBC, and twice was a featured speaker at TEDxOverlandPark. Did I miss anything, Alana?
It's a little embarrassing, but say more. No, that's so sweet. I appreciate your nice introduction, John. Thank you.
You're welcome. Jennifer Bardot is a producer of health and benefits for Willis Towers Watson, founder of Core Care 360, and best-selling author and publisher of Owning Your Grit, which, by the way, I was at the launch party for. Just want to put that out there right now. Jennifer earned her BA in Business Administration and 2 master's degrees in secondary education, counseling, and private practice therapy. She holds certificates in leadership through the Brené Brown Focus St. Louis Choral Women Cohort 72 and Leadership St. Louis by Focus St. Louis. Jennifer was named top business banker 6 months into her banking career and the top 100 person to know to help grow your business by St. Louis Small Business Monthly. She was awarded the President's Circle Award by Enterprise.ing Trust in 2020. She volunteers in multiple committees and national organizations such as Washington University, Association of General Contractors of Missouri, and others. Jennifer, did I miss anything there?
No, that's great. Thank you, John.
You're welcome. All right, so a little housekeeping for everybody. So we've set aside time for Q&A later in the program. So if you think of a question as the conversation goes along, you can send it in via Zoom chat, and I'll read it to Alana and Jennifer. If you'd like the opportunity to actually turn on your mic and camera and ask a question live, simply click the reactions button and then raise your hand button, and my producer will assist you, which our producer is Chris, and I don't know about you, but I really enjoyed the music today. I really found myself dancing.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. All right.
You got to love a little jaunty music before every presentation, I think.
Absolutely. Well, so I want to give the audience an opportunity to really, benefit from the kinds of conversations that the both of you and I have had over the last few months, and it's been really great. So I'd like to start with Jennifer with the premise of Owning Your Grit. Like, what was its mission and inspiration?
Yeah, so Owning Your Grit ended up being an international bestseller in 8 countries and a bestseller in the US, and Target, Walmart, Barnes & Noble, and Kindle and Amazon ended up picking it up. And this is very much a grassroots effort. And this is the first book that I have ever authored as well as published. So the inspiration actually came through a time when I seen a lot of women struggling, because I was supporting a lot of women-owned businesses within the St. Louis community. And this is the heightened time of COVID, when PPP loans were really dependent upon the success of these owners. And what really triggered my inspiration to creating this book was there was a statistic published by Forbes that it said the majority of the jobs lost during COVID were actually women. And that was actually over 5 million jobs that were lost within a 12-month period. And this is during 2020. So I had this idea when it was August of 2019. And I thought, oh my gosh, what do we need to do to support women in our community? We need to share inspiring stories. And that's essentially how we learn, is through stories. So I pulled together 40 women of various backgrounds, titles, and industries, and it ended up being such a success. And what's interesting is when I was preparing for this conversation, I actually went back to Forbes just to see if that statistic had changed. And in 2022, which obviously is what we're in now, Forbes is actually calling this Great Resignation the C-session, because this time of COVID has significantly impacted women in particularly. So that was my inspiration, and I'm a true supporter of women in our community.
Yeah, you absolutely are. And, for me, one of my commitments as a leader is to always take the role of the other. And what I enjoyed is that I read your book in the first 36 hours that I had it. And what I enjoyed about every single chapter was that there was something that I could learn, not only as a leader, but as a man in the workplace who, works with diverse audiences. Like it was such a valuable book. So I just wanted to thank you again for that.
Thank you for your feedback. I truly enjoyed it, and it was intimidating putting together such a book and not having any experience, but I really feel like it was inspiring to others, and not just women, men as well. And thank you for supporting us and attending the book lunch.
Absolutely. All right. So the first conversation I had with Alana, excuse me.
You got it. You got it.
I know. I always want to say Alana, and that was the story. She was like, "No, John, Alana, like banana, right?" And so that stays with me. So every time I look at your name, I'm like Alana, like banana. So
Great.
So what does coffee lunch coffee mean, and how does it make a difference for people?
So my story is that I had been a corporate executive with a Fortune 40 company, and I tell you, I loved it. I loved everything about it. It was a wonderful experience. But what happened was that in 2007, I went to a one-day professional development event in Chicago and flew home that night after really a life-changing experience, and announced to my poor sleeping husband that I was going to quit my job. And, we talked for a long time that night, and eventually he got it. He understood that I was interested my whole life in being an entrepreneur, and that it was time for me to go do that. But the truth is, I had no idea what I was going to do. I didn't have an idea, no plan. I didn't have the money to support that. And I had responsibilities at home, certainly, and I had 40 people reporting to me. So I thought that if I started reaching out to others in the community, that they might be willing to visit with me and help me clarify in my mind what this career path of mine might look like. So this notion of coffee, lunch, coffee was born. And I'll tell you that frequently when I tell people that the name of my company is Coffee, Lunch, Coffee, they want to know how much coffee I drink. And my little secret is that I don't drink coffee. I don't drink coffee. I hope that there are others of you out there who are my people. As you can probably tell, I'm very well caffeinated. So that is not the issue. I'm drinking lots of tea every single day. Got my trusty teacup right here. But the idea was that I thought if I structured my day around the days of the kinds of people like the two of you who I wanted to eventually connect with, that they would say yes. And so I carved out a morning meeting time slot, a midday meeting time slot, and an afternoon meeting time slot. And kind of as a joke, I called that morning, midday, and afternoon coffee, lunch, coffee, and it stuck. It's stuck. And, the idea is not for anybody to become stressed out. You don't have to be doing coffee, lunch, coffee every single day. But the notion is to be very intentional about the way that you connect with others in the community. And I have to tell you, I took for granted that this felt like a very simple approach. And it turns out that very few folks are actually doing that. And so the beauty of it is that if you do carve out a particular time of day, and frankly, it doesn't have to be every day, it could be even once a week. If you're willing to carve out that time and be the one to reach out to people, I guarantee that people will say yes, and you'll be able to not only build community around yourself, but for others as well. So that's what Coffee, Lunch, Coffee is all about.
Yeah. And Alana, when I look at our first conversation, you meet people in life that are so present and they're so in the other person's world that you, in literally 20 minutes, feel like that you've been friends for years. And that was my experience with you. And the idea of both of you together, on this talk today was really exciting to me, because both of you have this connection, or this commitment to really connecting, and not just at a local level or even a regional level. I'm talking like the global community. So I'd like to start with Jennifer. So, how do you share your own message of connection, Jennifer? And then Alana, we'll hear your response.
Sure.
Well, one of my friends, Rihanna Weiss, who's the executive director of Almost Home and actually one of the contributors of Own Your Grid, nicknamed me the connector. So I always lead from a servant leadership mindset. And when I'm having a conversation with someone, it's usually casual, so I can get to know them and I can understand the connections that are going to be bringing them value. And I always come from that perspective. So once I've had a conversation with someone, I get to kind of understand how they can support those in our community. So then when I meet someone else who would be a good introduction, just like Alana mentioned, it's all about being strategic and intentional, because I want to make sure if I'm taking the time, because time is obviously very valuable and you never want to waste anybody's time. So when I'm having a conversation with someone, I'm always very mindful about connections that I have already met with to bring them value, and extremely strategic about that. So, and through doing just that, so many doors have been open that I would have never thought would be the case. Like you said, internationally, I was asked to be on the DEC committee of, the government. And just last week, I was asked to be on the board for a domestic violence women's shelter. And I just think when you're intentional and you're present, like John just mentioned, being present, and opportunities always just present themselves. And especially if you come from a place of wanting to help others and not ever even getting anything in return. So it's kind of joyful when you can hear the results from a strategic connection.
Yeah, speaking of connection, and before we hop back to Alana, it's funny, somebody had connected with me on LinkedIn, and I have this cadence where I will respond with what inspired you to reach out if they don't tell me. And the person that connected with me launched into this wonderful, like 2-paragraph response talking about how Jennifer Bardot said you need to meet John Lanius. Oh my God, da, 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 da. And it made my day. And so it was really great to be at the effect or the impact of somebody speaking kindly of you behind the scenes, who then wants to reach out. So I think that totally fits with your share there. And then I throw it to Alana.
Okay, I love this question, and Jennifer, I love your response. Okay, gosh, I'm not even sure where to begin. There's so much to say. So the first thing is that if we receive each other in an authentic way the first time, and then the second time, and then the time after that, we are building, these are touch points. We're building a meaningful, authentic relationship. And my perspective on building relationships is that they should be done without some expectation of remuneration. Right. So the idea is that we're coming together. And by the way, sometimes there is a transaction that needs to be held. Right. So I'm no fool. I understand that sometimes we network to conduct business, and that's good. That's really good. I want that if the phone rings and you see it's me, I want you to pick it up. I want us to have a trusting enough connection that no matter what I'm on the other side of the phone for, that you are excited to receive me, and vice versa. I also think, Jennifer, exactly to your point, that the more we put out, so the more generous we are with our time, information, and resources, the so much more comes back to us. And I know that sounds a little bit trite, but the truth is, I believe that I've created value for others, but I can tell you it pales in comparison to the amount of value that I've received in return from the thousands of connections that I've been able to make over the years. When I first launched Coffee Lunch Coffee, and really before it was even a thing, it was really just kind of a joke. It was me networking, and I called it Coffee Lunch Coffee because it was a good way to articulate what it was that I was doing. What was interesting to me is that people started calling me, and I didn't understand it at first. And I said, they wanted to know, will you get together? My answer was yes, because I have to tell you, everybody said yes. right? In those first 9 months of me reaching out, I asked 205 people to meet with me, and 200 of them said yes. My little inside joke is I know the names of those other 5 people, but the truth is it's so irrelevant because 200 out of 205 said yes to me. And so my going in approach is to always say yes. And so by doing that, by being somebody who's there to help people, so as Jennifer described, being a servant leader, being at others' service, I guarantee so much more comes back to you. And this is how we build human connection. And that is how we build these trusting relationships through a series of touch points. Jennifer mentioned this international notion as well. You know, years ago, in fact, I was in St. Louis. I reside in the Kansas City area, but I remember years ago, I was giving a workshop on the topic of networking in the St. Louis area. And it was interesting. I was with a large multinational company. There were 70 women actually in the room at this conference. They all worked for the same company, but they came from 40 different countries, all in the same division. And most of them had never met in person. This is way before the days of Zoom and video conferencing. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't know if my message around networking is going to play in all of these other countries. I'm just not sure. And what they reassured me of is, yes, in fact, networking, building human relationships, building meaningful, authentic connections with other people is a human activity. This is something we all need to do. And frankly, I start almost every conversation from an educational perspective on the topic of networking by asking the question, how many of you would say you love networking? And I can tell you for every 10 people in the room, I get about 3.5 hands. People very reluctantly raise their hands. But when I describe to them that networking is not about sales, it's not about money, it's not about finding a job, and it's not about collecting a pocket full of other people's business cards, but rather what it's about is the simple, I don't know, I guess, addition of connections, community, and belonging, then people can say, actually, I might love it. I need connection. I have a need for connection. And the way that we satisfy that connection is by creating community everywhere we go. The 3 of us today, we are a community. Right? Our listeners today are part of our community. When we step outside our front door, it's our neighborhood, our community. If we meet up with somebody for a cup of coffee, community. And I think the reason we do that is to deepen our own sense of belonging, because it turns out that belonging feels really good, right? I feel really good belonging to the community of the 2 of you, because you make me feel special. You make me feel important, like I matter to you. And when we do that for other people, that's where we're creating value.
Yeah, I love that. Such a great response. And when you talk about belonging, you know, that's obviously related to well-being.
Yes.
You know? And I'm thinking, I mean, you know, I think all of us, whether you're listening to this live now or you're going to listen to this in months from now, if you were in business during the pandemic, everybody questioned their well-being. You know, I mean, I just remember what for me personally, but you know, I think that the well-being of an employee really has a lot to do with some basic, you know, psychology, understanding ourselves, or, you know, kind of maybe using even buzzwords that start a conversation. But I'm curious for the both of you, and let's start with Jennifer now, you know, and kind of looking at now we're getting out of the pandemic. Hopefully it doesn't come back, but you know, what have you learned about, you know, what leaders can be doing post-pandemic, and maybe what matters most to them and their employees? Jennifer, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, Alana actually kind of hinted on it. It definitely comes down to psychology. So when we are human, so when we feel seen, heard, that's how we build trust. That's how we build relationships. So right now, our leaders really need to be listening to their employees and their top talent, because that's how we're essentially going to be preventing folks from leaving. And right now I just looked at a statistic by WTW. They surveyed an attraction and retention stat, which said over 2/5 of an employee's employees are willing to make a move if they only get a 5% pay increase. That's not a significant amount, but people are literally at that breaking point where they're wanting to make a change because of wellness issues. And it also broke it down in regards to categories which are at risk, which are women, Black, Hispanic, low salary employees, as well as low financial well-being, as well as the Gen X population and LGBTQ+. So the overall well-being right now for employers should be actually top of their mind, because only 48% of the employees within an organization really have no intention of moving to a different company. That means significantly half of their culture is interested in moving based on well-being. And based on how they were treated during the pandemic by their employer will also put them at risk. So if they didn't feel as though the employer provided them wellness or financial well-being, they're going to be more apt to make a move. So once again, it just comes down to basic psychology, like Alana hinted at. We really need to make sure that as employers and leaders, we're listening to our talent, and we're boosting those communication channels so then everybody feels seen and heard, and we can find ways to improve the culture or the organization and listen to everybody, no matter where you at, what your title is, and how much you're making, because it's going to be essential in order to retain your talent. And wellness is key for production. So if we jump in and we have the tools to improve their well-being, they're essentially going to be more productive. So I would just tell leaders to start listening.
Mm-hmm.
Great share. So Alana, your thoughts?
What I would say, I completely agree with what Jennifer shared. And I would say, we have to be empathetic leaders. We have to, in addition to listening, we have to have a sense for how people are feeling. The last few years have taught us something very important, that we don't really like isolation. We really don't like it. Loneliness is a really bad feeling. And yet so many of us are feeling that way. And so whatever we can do to break down that sense of isolation, that sense of loneliness, I think will be beneficial, even if we're working remotely, even if we're living in a hybrid world, which, by the way, I think is the new sort of way things will be. We will never, I don't believe, come back fully in person. I hope we don't go back for fully virtually either. I do hope that it's a hybrid culture. And frankly, that can be a really good thing. We've been talking about connections across the miles. This is not just about what we're doing in our local communities, but what we're doing in our global community. Again, not to sound so esoteric about it, but it's true. As long as we have communication tools like Zoom and others like it, we will be able to connect with other people. And I know for my own mental health, just seeing other human faces over the last 2.5, 3 years has been really, really important. I'm not one who appreciates isolation. Certainly, I like my downtime like anybody does, but I thrive in the presence of others. And I think our leaders need to understand that building that community, creating that sense of belonging is going to be really critical. And as Jennifer described, listening to what our employees are asking us for and what they need in order to be healthy, it will make our companies healthier. And by the way, when people leave our companies, that's expensive, right? It costs us a lot of money to retrain, to recruit. And so anything we can do to retain will be beneficial to our company as a whole.
Yeah, both great responses. What I'm present to when I'm listening to the responses right now is that I feel like that we're kind of moving to a conversation around a well-being strategy. So let's jump back to Jennifer then for a moment. So Jennifer, how can leaders develop and also deploy, wellness strategies that align with the mission and vision of our companies?
Well, when we're talking about wellness, we have to break it down into 5 categories. So it's physical, emotional, financial, social, and integrated implementation. And that's how an organization should be looking at it, because it's not just one category of well-being, it's the holistic approach. And that right there is critical. There's different tools that you can actually survey your population within the organization to see where everybody is in alignment. And then you can actually give them the diagnostic tools through workshops that is very customized based on your employees' responses. So like, for instance, WTW actually has a well-being diagnostic tool. So we put together a scorecard like you would get for anything else. And we have customized solutions based on the results that these employees are giving, us as in regards to feedback. So once again, it comes down to listening. So if you're surveying your population and they're coming back with, we need this, we can customize the workshops based on the results of those scorecards. So you really have to listen and do the work to take action to prevent, more anxiety, more, feeling unheard or not seen. So we have to break that cycle and really get in the weeds more or less and figure out what's going on with the employees and what it looks like and how we can build these workshops around whatever that is that they're saying on the scorecards.
Okay. And then Alana, your thoughts on well-being.
So what I'm seeing with my clients is that we're doing a lot of training on the topic of relationship building, and it's both within and without in terms of the company. So it's building relationships inside the company, because, gone are sort of the clear days of water cooler discussions of getting to know somebody in the lunchroom. And so we have to find other ways to connect our associates together. I know there are a lot of young people today who literally have never worked in an office environment, even though the traditional approach for many of the companies they're going to work for was an in-person office environment. So they're looking for other ways to make connections. So I know for my company, for Coffee Lunch Coffee, we're doing a lot of networking skills training. And the good news is that because this is a human activity, not only does it work for building relationships inside the company, but then of course outside the company. And for myself, what I always talk about with my clientele is that this is not just about the workplace. I don't think that we are just one thing. I know in the United States, we have a tendency to compartmentalize our lives. We have sort of a home life, a work life, and a community life, and nary the twain shall meet. And I don't really understand that. I like to think of our lives as more like a Venn diagram. I was a math major, so you have to forgive me. But if you think about home, work, community as a Venn diagram, the closer those things get together, something happens magically in the center where there's that overlap. And I think that's where we play our most authentically. That's where we feel our most comfortable, our most alive, our happiest. And so if our employers can help us do that, they don't have to be one circle, right? We can save a little bit of ourselves just for home, just for work, just for community. But the closer they get together, the more we can be who we actually are. And so what I'm finding is that the best employers are really taking that into consideration. And they're saying, we want you to build relationships both inside and outside the company. That's okay. We're encouraging you to do that. In fact, we're giving you funding to do that. We're giving you permission. We're giving you time to take the opportunity to get to know others, both your colleagues, as well as current and prospective clients.
Yeah, I think that your responses, your perspectives are really right on. And so I want to go back to the pandemic, and I want to just imagine for a moment before the pandemic and the kinds of conversations that we were having in the workplace, or the kinds of conversations we were having with each other in networking, scenarios. I'm curious, Jennifer, I'll start with you. How has networking or the conversations around getting connected to people, has it changed since the pandemic? And if so, how?
I think it has changed significantly. I think my connections have flourished in comparison to what they look like pre-COVID, just because of access, because virtual events are now free. So we're able to talk to anybody from different time zones, different associations, especially if you're plugged in nationally. And I just feel like if you're actively doing the work, all those doors have opened, and there's certainly more buzz around LinkedIn. Pre-COVID, that really wasn't a go-to place. People kind of put their nose up if you were messaging people. Now everybody utilizes LinkedIn, and in fact, during COVID, I actually built a group called Thought Partners with a partner of mine at Enterprise.ing and Trust named Laura Gabar, and we have built that group to over 400 women in the past 2 years. So I think everybody is actually wanting to connect, because about how Alana alluded to earlier, we're naturally connectors. That's just part of our DNA. We like to be seen and we like to see others. So actively finding groups where you can get plugged in has really been important post, pre, and I don't know what we're in right now. I don't know if we're going back into COVID or what it is, but I just feel like that sense of connection is really urgent. And I think it's been a lot easier with COVID actually happening.
Yeah, I mean, the notion, this idea of access, I think is a really important word. And I think that for some marginalized communities, they don't always feel like they have access. And so one thing that I have noticed since the pandemic started is, first of all, conversations have become a little bit more intimate, if you can imagine. It sounds almost counterintuitive, but almost in like this Zoom world, people are disclosing more. They're in their home environment. I suppose we all could have, blurred our backgrounds, and there are certainly ways that we can sort of change our surroundings. But I can tell you, this is my office. You're seeing where I live every single day. I'm surprised that my dog is not snoring right now for you all on the floor. And, and we heard stories like this, very human stories where, CEOs would be sitting on an important Zoom call talking about a merger, and a 3 4-year-old child would come and run and jump on her mommy's lap because her mommy's her mommy, even though she's the CEO of XYZ company. And so we heard these stories. And so in some ways, we humanized ourselves a little bit more. And so I think that we're seeing that as we come out of COVID, I hope, and whether we're virtual or in person, what I'm finding is that people are making accommodations for others that were not happening pre-pandemic. The other thing I'll say is that as we do come out of the pandemic, people are wanting to get together in person more. The interesting thing is that we're not really turning off the spigot when it comes to Zoom. What I'm finding is that most companies, not all, but most companies are not just making accommodations, but they're creating events that truly are virtual. There's at least a component where somebody dialing in from home can be part of the conversation, even if they're not physically present in the room. I'll tell you, for one of my clients, I organize events, and we had an event a few weeks ago. I happened to not be feeling well. So it was my event and I was super excited about it and I couldn't go. So first of all, I relied on my very capable colleagues at this company to make sure that whatever was happening in person still happened. And I watched from home, from a virtual setting. And in some ways, it was great to be able to see that this really can come together. You can still have a successful gathering. You can still have a successful event, both in terms of the networking component, as well as in terms of whatever presentation is taking place. And I hope that that continues.
Well,
And I would just like to add, as a mother, it's been really a game changer for when you have kids that are sick, or if they're off because of a snow day, I can still keep my meetings and still, resume business as necessary. So I feel like that's been a tremendous game changer as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, both of your responses actually hit on exactly what we do here at Geniecast. When I look recently, at the St. Louis University Be Heard Women in Leadership Conference, when this was being planned, it looked like that COVID was beginning to dip. And the question was, should we have a virtual component? And the response that we've gotten back from that has been amazing. And if we look at our clients like L'Oreal and Pizza Hut and all the other, the clients that we work with, in really creating this ability to be able to tap into the information internationally with a couple of clicks. I mean, I think that's the future. And then the last point that I'll make about this is that when you look at our 3D technology, our holograms that we're able to send people like Steve Wozniak to India, or Simon Sinek, to different places around the world. It's like, I think that with the advent of the metaverse and other digital solutions that are becoming to get into play here, is that I think the next generation, and the one after that especially, we're going to spend half of our time in the virtual world and half of our time in the real world. I'm using air quotes clearly, and I think that's how business is going to change. Like, the three of us on this Zoom call today, right? That's one possible platform. Like, we're using other platforms for some of our other clients that allow us to be able to have breakout rooms, two-way communication, and really still make a positive difference. So, by the way, this wasn't planned in giving a little bit of a commercial, but it's exactly, what it is that we're doing. And we're seeing how, pandemic or not, people want to be involved, and being ill or having some kind of a disability, like that accounts for that. And when you talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, these are solutions that every single company on the planet needs to be thinking about, so people can be included. Just because you're out of the office because you can't come in for whatever reason doesn't mean you can't click on. And so what are your thoughts with that?
I have a great story that kind of ties into that whole sector about access, DEI, all of that. So during the height of COVID, I think it was, we're in the mix. We're trying to apply for this PPP. The government had just launched this application, but what did they forget? They forgot to have it translatable in Spanish. So I remember one of my friends had posted this post on LinkedIn. Her name's Gabriela Ramirez Alando, and she heads up the Hispanic Chamber and many other different things. And she just couldn't believe that the government forgot to publish this document that's going to dictate if a business gets funding or not in Spanish. So I remember seeing that post and actively reached out to her thinking, hey, have you ever heard of a local company in St. Louis called AAA Translation? She's like, no, connect me. So I had initially met Suzanne through attending a Sister Cities event for Stuttgart, which was trying to actually bring more folks from Germany over to St. Louis. So I had attended that event, and through that I met Suzanne. So I remember her business from years ago, pre-COVID. So I made that introduction, and through that introduction, Gabriella was able to connect them with the City of St. Charles, and they were able to translate that document into Spanish and then give access to an entire community that had been forgotten and missed. So that's a perfect example about how network, connection, access all kind of came together during COVID. And I love that story because it made such a tremendous impact in a specific community that was just overlooked.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, John, you were talking about the work that Geniecast does, and to me, it's a great example of, you know, taking into consideration all of the resources available to us. You know, I think about, Tom Friedman writes in a lot of his work about he says that, you know, the exponential rate of growth in terms of where we're going with from a technology perspective is just mind blowing, and I'm sure he uses much more technical terms, but that's my term. And what it makes me think about is my son. I have a son, he'll be 19 in July. He's never known that there wasn't always television, music, movies, games available on a phone. In fact, he doesn't know that a phone wasn't always, you know, without a cord that we could carry around in our pocket. And so, you know, so we're now moving into a new generation where we could call them the TikTok generation, right? I mean, they don't know that wasn't always a thing. They don't know that resources like Zoom weren't always available. You know, I was watching a television program recently, and somebody as a joke said, you know, let's send each other emails. And the response was, I'm not 40, let's just text. And so it's very funny to see kind of how quickly technology is ramping up. And I want to harness that from a networking perspective. I want it not to distance us more from one another, but to bring us together. And I do think that services like Geniecast have captured that. They understand that we have to take advantage and leverage all of the resources available to us so that we can be better connected to one another.
Yeah.
And if I can even make a small plug to Enterprise Bank and Trust. I mean, during COVID, we had Enterprise University, which was essentially always held in person, and they quickly pivoted and they allowed it accessible virtually in all of our markets, which talk about access. Those resources are incredible. So I know technology is just constantly the new wave, and it's opening up more opportunity and more opportunities to learn and grow.
Yeah, I've told this story a couple of times, and I may have told it to you, Jennifer, but what's interesting to me at the beginning of the pandemic, when I was thinking about technology, and tech has been, you know, as a part of my career for 25 years. And like when I remembered reading The Naked Sun by Isaac Asimov, a book from 1957, in The Naked Sun, he's on this planet called Solaria, the main character, and they're investigating a murder. But on this planet, there's only 10,000 humans and there's 1 million robots. And the reason why there's only 10,000 humans is because there was a global pandemic that killed off a lot of the humans. And now through social distancing and other things that they do, they spend most of their time on two-way screens and on holograms. And this is 1957. And I went back and I read this at the beginning of the pandemic. And oh my gosh, we are literally living out, you know, what Isaac Asimov had written down. And Ray Kurzweil, who you may know, we work with a lot here at Geniecast. And I mean, you know, he handpicks a couple of our team members here to go to his house to actually work on his technology. And I think that we're getting to this point where, you know, we're used to this now, but you remember at the beginning of the pandemic, it was like, you're on mute. What are you doing? Where'd you go? You know, like
Right.
Everybody like all over the place. And now we're just like, oh yeah, well, send me a Zoom link, you know, and it's just become that. And sometimes you got to ask yourself, are humans, you know, too adaptable? You know, what do you think about that? Are humans too adaptable, or are we just right? What are your thoughts?
That's a tough question. You know, I think to the extent that it is possible to dissociate or detach from one another, yeah, maybe we're a little too adaptable, but the fact that we can adapt and then we can fall down and pick ourselves up and dust off and keep moving forward, I think is really great and really great. And I, you know, not to be so Pollyanna-ish about it, but I just think that that has to be the going approach. We have to be able to leverage, again, the tools that we have at our disposal in a positive way. And it is quite remarkable. I mean, so many different books that are so old, or movies, and they almost anticipated what we've gone through in the last 2.5 years, whereas none of us could have, and imagined that we would be where we are. In some ways, there are a lot of silver linings that came from the pandemic. I know for me, it was being able to engage in services like Geniecast, and being able to teach online, to be able to continue to do my strategy work, to continue to coach. Again, what that did for me is it made it so I wasn't so isolated from other people. And what it did for my clients is it showed them, I hope, that somebody was out there who cared about them, despite being so far removed.
Jennifer, adaptable to adaptable?
I love the flexibility, and I think that's probably why I thrived during COVID, because give me a challenge and I want to figure out how to overcome it and how to bring everybody else with me. So I thought it was incredible. And I think we've all we've learned to own our grit, because we've actually realized the fact that, during difficult times, we can continue to show up and keep making small steps. A book that I truly love is Atomic Habits. And I feel like sometimes when we feel a bit defeated, it's great to look at it from that lens, to just realize, even if it's a small step, it's a step in the right direction. And if you support yourself with the community and the tools, you can get to the direction that you're heading. And I just think it actually helps you evaluate your relationships and figure out where you want to be spending your time and what truly matters. And I feel like, obviously, there's statistics that show this, which is why everybody's kind of doing this great reshuffling to figure out, am I truly living my vision, mission, and purpose of my life? And so I think it helped everybody get more grounded and more authentic in the sense of who they are and owning that. So
that whole thing, James Clear's book and Atomic Habits is such a good one. And it honestly so incredibly timed for the pandemic. 1% better each day, 1% better each day. And by the way, we could get 1% worse each day, and that would not be a good thing. And so the notion is, how do we develop habits that are really positive? And I do think reaching out. John, you asked us earlier about what do companies need to do? What does leadership need to do in order to retain their employee base? And it's 1% better each day. Listen a little bit more, offer a few more tools, and it doesn't have to cost us anymore. In fact, I think in the long run, it will be an economic benefit to every organization that does this.
Yep.
Fantastic. All right, we've got about 15 minutes remaining. So if anyone has a question, you can place that in the chat, and I'll be more than happy to pass that on. But if you don't, that's totally fine. We will fill up the time, I promise. So in looking at, those who haven't engaged in effective networking in the past, what advice do you have to help them get started? And, Jennifer, what are your thoughts?
I would say that it's never too late to get started. And if it's intimidating to jump into a room, bring a buddy. Who said you can't go to a networking event with a friend? If that's going to ease your anxiety and allow you to actually connect with people. Because when you go into that room, you should set yourself with a goal of how many people you want to talk with. You shouldn't just be leaving with business cards. You should have an authentic conversation with someone, so then you can have a meaningful conversation after that event. So I would say bring a buddy if you can't show up by yourself without being comfortable, but it's never too late to get started. Get plugged in. I also call this the mirror effect, because I think when you're authentic, you should really know yourself and you should know your interests. And Alana hinted at this earlier. It's not just based on your professional careers and interests. Look at your personal interests. Are you interested in hiking? Are you interested in golfing? What does that look like? Because they have defined groups in those sectors where, there might be a hiker, but he's also a CEO or a CFO or could add value in some way with connection. So there's no such thing as a wasted conversation when you meet with anybody new. And I think having that mindset going in is really important. So find the groups that bring you interest, so you can authentically make connections, because that's how the relationships are going to spur more opportunity.
Get a buddy.
Totally agree. And what I would say is, not only is it never too late, now is a really perfect time to start, because this is a human activity. We all need it. And what I usually encourage people to do is to prepare to begin the networking process. When I first began networking in earnest, a very dear friend coached me and said, make 4 lists. The first list is a list of people you already know, people already in your relationship base who you want to reestablish your connection with. And frankly, it could be somebody you saw this morning at the gym. It could be your dear old Aunt Sally that you haven't seen in 12 Thanksgivings. I don't know, but identify the people that you want to reconnect with and do it. Hold yourself accountable for reestablishing those connections. And by the way, I know that thousands of people. It doesn't have to be 1,000 people. Start with 5. But once you get through that initial 5, add 5 more. List number 2 is a list of people you don't know but would like to. And I know this is a more difficult list to make, but look in your local business journal. Identify the local community leaders, elected officials, your neighbors, people who are the parents of the Little League players on your child's team. Identify the people who you want to connect with. And again, make a list. And what I find is that if you tell the people on list number 1 that you want to connect with the people on list number 2, they will often make those connections for you. List number 3 is similar to list number 2. It's a list of companies or firms or organizations that you want to get to know, because sometimes you don't know the first and last name of the people you don't know, but you know the kinds of companies. So if, for example, you've always wanted to get involved in the community, your favorite thing is your puppy dog, maybe the local animal shelter could use your time and attention. And so write down on your list, I want to get to know the local animal shelter. You can go to the internet and find the name of the executive director or the chairman of the board and get started. The 4th list is a list of your personal values. It's kind of your non-negotiables, those things you're not willing to give up through the networking process. And if you do that, if you say, I want to meet people in my community, I want to make a difference, I want to serve others, I want to find a job. If you are very clear about what it is that you're looking for, I guarantee as you put that out into the universe, it will come back to you. So that's what I would say is begin right now, begin with the people around you and build out from there.
Alana, I think that's great. I mean, you went right into not only resources, but also tactics. I think that's fantastic. So Jennifer, let's build on that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was just going to say one of my really good friends who's actually a speaker at Enterprise University, Justine Folker, she's the certified Brene Brown coach. She always says clear is kind. And I think that is just a really simplistic way to look at that through networking, because when you define what you're looking for, people are more likely to help you. So if you go on LinkedIn and you know you're going to be having a meeting with someone, to maximize their time. John, this is a perfect example. First time we met, I knew your time was valuable. I had 30 minutes with you. I knew if we hit it off, there was a list of people that you were connected with on LinkedIn. I wanted to see if you'd give me access to. So if you're strategic and you're intentional and you value people's time and you're coming at it from the right place, there's more opportunity. So I don't know if you remember that, John, but I was very much to the point. I said, hey, can I use your name? Are you okay with me reaching out to these people? And here's why. And I just think clear is kind, and be strategic and be intentional with everybody's time, not only yours.
Yeah, I love that. Obviously, when you were talking about you said being real or being authentic. I can't remember the exact word you just used because it sent me off into this thought. It's like you meet so many people where it's like they don't want to be authentic about why they're specifically meeting. When I worked for the government and some of the work that I did, they would teach us what they would refer to as dark psychology, right? The ability to like actually manipulate or control, and there's a positive to that and there's a negative to it. And one of the benefits of learning all that is that you become hyper aware when someone's attempting to do that, and you also then temper yourself to make sure that you're not doing that. And so I think the point that you're making, that you both have made in wonderful ways, throughout this whole talk, is really about, really the title of what we're talking about today, which is authentic connection, healthy communities, and long-term well-being. And for me, like, when we aligned on this title, I was like, oh my gosh, we only have an hour. I mean, like, imagine. This is a conversation that never ends, and it also changes as we mature, as what's important to us shifts. And so I think kind of within the next like 10 minutes, I'd really like to know, like, let's focus again, on the title: authentic connection, healthy communities, and long-term well-being. And so, Alana, I'd love for you to start and really leave us with some thoughts around the title of today's Smart Talk, that expands the conversation.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that I like to tell people is that you already have everything in your toolkit that you need to be a great networker. I mean, I don't know if anybody looked at my title. I think, the world's greatest title, and that is I'm a master networker. And what I hereby bestow on anyone who's listening to us today, having the conversation with us, I bestow the title on you. You are all master networkers because you already have everything that you need at your disposal. And frankly, the number one tool that you have, what I say is the welcome mat to a great, meaningful, authentic relationship is a smile. Okay. And I'm not trying to be creepy or silly, but what's so interesting about a smile is that when you simply smile at somebody, and it can be smiling with your eyes, because people always want to know what happens if you're masked. Well, there's still a way to smile. And what it basically says is, I'm open to connecting with you. I welcome you into my life. And again, it doesn't have to be creepy or weird. It's simply a smile to say hello and to encourage somebody to connect with you. So I would say, understand that you are already the great networker that you need to be. You're already a master networker. In fact, think about the personality traits of the kinds of people that you like to hang out with. I guarantee many of you are thinking about happy, positive, confident, optimistic, fun, funny, quirky, not quirky, whatever it is. And then you be that person. You take on the characteristics of the kinds of people you like to hang out with. And I'm not encouraging people to be anyone who they're not. This is not about faking it till you make it. What it's about is be your most authentic self. Be the person that you would want to hang out with. And I guarantee with that smile and with that attitude that you are a great networker, you'll be a magnet for others who want to connect with you.
So what I love about what you said about smiling, what I got present to was a story about a guy I used to work with. His name was Jack Schropp, and Jack Schropp was a Navy SEAL. And this is what he would do when he would meet everybody. He would say, "Good morning. My name is Jack. This is Happy." And I mean, the room would just like fall down. But like when you say, be who you are,
Yeah.
like that was Jack. Like this Jack, I am happy. Like, but, so obviously we have to learn different things based on like where we are. But the beauty of having people be who they are, also in the workplace, is a form of well-being. Absolutely, Jennifer.
I would say lean into your boldness. I mean, I think it's really important, because as we show up as our true selves, we're able to connect with those that are like us, and that alignment will then naturally happen. So very much like both of you guys have said, we need to show up and we need to actually be ourselves and be authentically ourselves, and be fearless in the sense that if you're scared that someone's going to judge you for who you are, you should just be yourself and be okay with it, because those people that want to be around you because you're being your true self, they will continue to support you. And I feel like I missed one part earlier, so I want to readdress this, but I feel like I'm able to ask for those introductions because I've earned the ask. So I want to reiterate the importance of that servant mindset leadership. So when you're trying to build a connection, always come from a place of how can you add value, because that's going to help you establish that trust. And if you're being authentic and there are no smoke and mirrors and your true self, people will see that, and then they'll want to be supportive of you moving forward. So
yeah, Jennifer, your point is so well taken. I remember when I first began networking intentionally, I asked 5 people to meet with me, not knowing if they would say yes. All 5 said yes. And I said, I'm thinking about making this career move. What do you think? 4 of the 5 said I was, perfectly within my right to go do that. I should have thought of it sooner, go do it. 1 told me I was out of my mind, and he wasn't very nice about it. But I'll tell you, all 5 asked me this final follow-up question, which truly changed my life. And I offer it to our listeners today. And that is, what can I do to help you? I mean, it's very simple. What can I do to help you? This is not about what have you done for me lately? It's what can I do to help you? And frankly, we should all be prepared for that question. Not only should we ask the question, we should be prepared to respond to that question. And it's interesting, when you are the one to ask the question, what can I do to help you? People are almost caught off guard. And if you ask it in a way that it's truly authentic, where you genuinely want to help and you actually have the capacity to follow through, where you have, not only are you following through, but you're building social capital as you follow through. And just like Jennifer described, she earned those connections. She earned the right to make additional connections to those connections because she was authentic in the way that she received those interactions. If you are that person, I guarantee you it's going to continue to pay dividends. And again, that exponential growth in terms of your relationship base will be amazing.
Yeah, I love that. And then Alana, you mentioned smoke and mirrors, and I didn't plan to
did.
share this. Oh, you did. I'm sorry, you did.
All good. Yeah.
Oh, it's all good. Whoever
Now
said
we're one person.
We're very much in alignment. It's okay.
Yeah, well, smoke and it was interesting. So this weekend, I gave actually 2 academic talks on the history of incense, which when you say the word incense in America, you get all of these like different connotations that pop up, right? But I was specifically talking about the 1400-year Japanese tradition with incense, and the word is kodo, do meaning the way, ko meaning incense. And the idea is that in the Japanese culture, they've developed a form of incense burning that actually has less smoke. And so the teaching is this, is that when you are being your authentic self, is that you need to be fragrant. You need to be no smoke, nothing that gets in the way of who you really are. And so it takes this sometimes mysterious, history that's been with human beings since the beginning of written history. And we know the archaeological evidence is 35,000 years old. But this whole idea that if everything we do and every interaction that we have, we are our fragrant self, like our true authentic self, we then make a difference with others. Because when you take a rose that's very fragrant, and if you like roses, by the way, and you smell it, it's like you're lifted up, right? And so in looking at today's, talk of being authentic connection, healthy communities, and long-term well-being, to normalize the humanness that I think both of you, touched on throughout this is really, I think, the next evolution of where we are. And whether we do it virtually as we're doing right now, or whether we're doing it in person or didactically, or, whatever words you want to use for how we're going to connect, this is a part of the human experience, and it won't go away. And when we saw we saw the detriment of not focusing on that. So with just a couple of minutes remaining, I'm going to ask again, Alana, what would you like to leave us with? Maybe a quote, maybe a story, something like that.
I want people to connect. Let's connect is what I say. I will tell you that my life's purpose is to connect, inspire, and empower community. And I want you each to do that for yourselves. And not only will you find your own well-being within that, but you'll be giving to your community in a way that, again, is immeasurable, where you're building social capital that will pay dividends for years to come. So thank you for joining us today.
Love that. Jennifer.
Yeah, and I would say listen and be curious. Be curious about someone else, because you never know where you guys are going to, come together and have a similar perspective or a commonality or a bond. If you're meeting someone for the first time, come with a list of questions you want to learn about them, because then they'll actually have an opportunity to share about themselves, and who doesn't like talking about themselves? So get curious, lean in, and just be bold and be your authentic self. And I guarantee you the right relationships will come through. So,
all right.
Thank you for letting me be here today.
Yeah, well, if you're not already inspired to reach out to these 2 wonderful leaders, I'm going to invite you to do that, because they are great to know. So we are now going to move to the end. As much as I don't want to move to the end, we have to. So thank you for joining us on today's Smart Talk, Authentic Connection, Healthy Communities, and Long-Term Wellbeing with Alana Muller and Jennifer Bardot. Smart Talks are powered by Geniecast with support from the Nitrous Effect and the Emerson Leadership Institute and the Shape It School of Business at St. Louis University, where there is a commitment for higher purpose, greater good, through a focus on where mission meets the market. I'm John Lanius, and we'll see you on the next Smart Talks powered by Geniecast. Learn more at geniecast.com. Thank you again. Have a great day.